Hello everyone and welcome to Pushing Positivity on the Pier, where we introduce amazing people, take a deeper look into their story, and share how they're making positivity actionable each day. I'm Josh Schiller, and today we are joined by father, husband, and CEO of the health and wellness brand Theramu, Joel Greengrass. Welcome to the show, sir.
Welcome, thanks. Great to be here.
How's it feel to be back in Hoboken?
I love it. Lived here for a long time, one of my favorite places in the world.
Why'd you leave?
Absolutely love it. Schools. Had 3 kids in school. Had to, but love it every time I come back. My wife and I loved being here. My kids loved being here.
Did you grow up around Hoboken, or where'd you grow up?
I grew up in North Jersey.
Okay.
So, but I originally moved to Hoboken after college, and then after a short stint away, came back once our first was born, and yeah, didn't want to leave. I think we were here for like 7-8 years with the kids, so it was pretty awesome.
Well, thank you for being here first and foremost. I always love kind of how people wind up at the show, and we actually got connected via a mutual friend, and we're here.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah.
So, you talked about going to school, or came here after school, right? After college?
Yeah, a year after college I came here.
So what'd you do in college?
So I went to Rutgers undergrad, and I majored in honors marketing and art.
Honors marketing, is that different?
It was a separate program, yeah.
Really? You're extra special.
Well, it was funny. When I went to Rutgers, there was no business school when I first got to Rutgers, and then they started the business school after my freshman year, and you had to reapply to get to the business school.
Once you were already in?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I ended up doing that and going to the business school, which was essentially a set of trailers on one of the other campuses. Like it was actually horrendous. But yeah, they had an honors marketing program where you worked with a mentor throughout your program and did some independent study stuff. So it was kind of cool. And I originally thought I was going to go into advertising.
Did it say like honors marketing on the degree?
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
And like when I graduated, there was only like 5 of us, and we had like asterisks next to our name.
That's like a differentiation, right? I mean, you didn't just do marketing; you did honors marketing.
Yeah, except nobody knew what it meant outside of the 5 of us who actually had it. So it didn't really help me much. But I thought I would always combine like the marketing with like the art stuff, and I'd go and be like this, madman type, ad exec. But
did you have a kind of creative? You always knew you had this creative side to you.
I've always loved art. Like I grew up, I did a lot of drawing, and then when I got to school, I ended up doing a lot of ceramics for whatever reason. I just thought it was the coolest thing. It was so much fun and like the best stress reliever in the world, and maybe the most impractical major in the world. Yeah, it was post Ghost. Yes. Yeah, maybe I was just picturing, Demi and Patrick, and yeah. No, it was, I loved it. I mean, again, completely, I think my parents were like, we're paying for what? Like, you're going to arts and craft classes?
So we had this joint passion for art and also marketing as well. So we graduate, right, with the asterisk. What were the next steps from there?
So I had, between my junior and senior year of college, I had an internship at a bank, at a retail bank in the city. And at the end of my internship, they were like, oh, someone's leaving our department. If you can start now, even part-time, we'll bring you on full-time as soon as college is over. So I would commute from New Brunswick 1 or 2 days per week to go in and do this kind of like part-time banking. That was market research. Yeah. So I did that, and I went right into that job after school, which didn't leverage either my marketing or my art backgrounds.
Totally logical.
But it was a job, so yeah.
So we get the first job. It's not in anything we really studied for, right? How long did that last?
So it was an interesting journey that I actually learned a lot, and I think a year to the day that I had started, I was my first introduction to the world of consultants, because our bank was struggling a lot. They'd invested heavily in like New Jersey real estate, which at the time was like tanking, and these consultants come in and they're gonna take a look at how to re-engineer the marketing term. First time I heard the word like re-engineer, it sounded pretty impressive. Yep. And there's like all this energy and positivity, and I come in one day and literally like I'm watching my boss's boss's boss get escorted out by security. Like they wouldn't even let the dude go back for his glasses. Wow. And then I watch my boss's boss get escorted out. And then I watch my boss get escorted out. And literally one at a time, everybody in the department. This is like a 7-hour operation. I'm the last person. Like I'm sitting at my desk, like afraid to get up and go to the bathroom. I'm like nervous.
And you couldn't even check Facebook at this point, right?
There was it didn't exist, right? There was nothing. I couldn't text anyone what was going on. There was no cell phones yet. And at like 4 o'clock that day, they bring me in, and they're like, "You look awful. What's going on?" And I'm like,
I just watched everybody.
I just watched you fire 60 people, right? Like, and you know, and I'm next, and they're like, oh no, you're staying. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it would have been nice to have told me earlier in the day. Like, I had no fingernails left. Like, I was physically ill.
Yeah.
And they said, you know, we're starting this new department.
Honors marketing.
Yeah, honors marketing and ceramics. We saw your ceramics background. And, you know, we'd like you to go over and head up the market research area within this internal consulting group that we're going to build. So congratulations. And I was like, all right. Like, and afterwards I had found out that there were people who were close to the process who, when they were, you know, I guess I was so oblivious at that point. I was like 22, 23 years old. So it had gotten around to like senior level people, and like every single one of them came back and was like, no, you got to keep Joel Greengrass. You got to keep Joel Greengrass. And when I asked them, like, listen, I'm thrilled, but I'm like, do you mind asking, like, why? Like, everybody here literally has more experience than I do. And it was like work ethic. Like, it's the one thing that nobody can ever outdo you with, right? Like, if you're going to work harder than everybody, it doesn't matter if you're, you know, the smartest, the dumbest, the biggest, the smallest. Like, you know, work ethic is something that everybody can have. It was the one thing that I can control, but I didn't think I was doing anything extraordinary. I just thought I was doing my job. And it's weird in today's world where people are used to like these 80-hour work weeks, and you know, you're on all the time.
Hustle hard, right? Hustle.
But back then it was like, you know, the people that I work with, like 5 o'clock, like they would pack up and leave. Like, I wasn't trying to outwork people consciously. I knew that other people's jobs depended on what I was doing, and if they made a request, I assumed it was important, and I wanted to get it done. So
you were accountable.
And it ultimately, you know, it saved my job.
So you made it past the first round, or the final round of Survivor, before Survivor was even there.
Yeah, exactly.
Now what was life like for Joel?
So they decided, I guess they fell in love with consulting too. They were going to build this internal consulting group in the bank. So what they did was, their philosophy, they told me, was they were taking the best and brightest from each area of the bank, and they were going to put together like kind of this elite team that was going to be able to consult to other areas of the bank. I got to be part of building something, and that was my first hint. I don't even think I probably knew what the word entrepreneurial meant at the time, but this was building something from scratch in this behemoth of a bank.
Okay, so now we gain some more experience of actually being an entrepreneur within a bigger organization. Gives you a little bit of exposure to operating within quote-unquote startup, right? Under this big umbrella. How long was that for?
I ended up staying around for probably another year. So I fell in love with the consulting part, right? I loved that there was this problem-solving aspect to, like, work didn't have to be task-oriented, like that you could solve big, meaty problems. But I also knew that the way we were going about it was not the right way, and that there had to be another way to do it. So I ended up going from there to Anderson Consulting, who was starting up a strategic consulting group. Anderson Consulting was really mostly systems consulting, and they had this like kind of like nascent strategy group that I think had been around for a year. Somehow I got a job there. And again, this is like, think of the times, right? Like, I found the ad in a newspaper. I went and I interviewed, my first round of interviews was with a recruiter it was the Hyatt, like by Grand Central. So I was super, super excited, ended up going over there, and you know, Anderson was this unbelievably unique experience because they were hiring the best and the brightest, and everybody that I've always said, like, when people ask me, like, what do I look for in a company? I'm like, I just want to be the dumbest person, right? You surround yourself with smart people, you're going to have an ability to learn. Like, I was the dumbest person. Like, people around me were brilliant. And at the same time, I had started, before I left the banking job, I had started going for my MBA at night. So that was a whole new experience for me.
Were there kids at this point?
No, I wasn't married or anything. I'd met my wife when I was at Anderson. So this is pertinent. Blind date, Hoboken, Texas, Arizona.
All right, so we're at Anderson. At this point, was this something that you really, like, you were set? You were like, I'm building a career here? Or was this something that you looked at and you were like, you know, this would be a good stepping stone, a good experience to do something else?
I think early on, I thought Anderson would be a career. Like, they had this partnership track, and you would get you very, very excited about what that looked like. And I loved traveling every week to wherever my clients were. I felt like a grown-up. Like, it was, I really enjoyed it a lot. At one point, I was asked to manage a project that we ultimately called Millennium Plus. Again, this is now probably 1992, right? So it's like starting to prepare for like strategy in the next millennia, you know, and how is technology gonna, it was really, how is technology and banking, how are they gonna intersect? So we were talking a lot about, you know, finance and banking and technology and the whole concept of being able to bank from home. And
mind blown.
The partners lost their mind, literally yelling at me, telling me people will never trust their financial information to a computer. Like, you guys don't know what you're talking about. We can't believe that we wasted all this money. Like, I was getting skewered. The closed-mindedness really, really left a bad taste in my mouth. And at that same time, the associate partner that I was working with on that project got a call from a consulting firm up in Boston that was looking to expand down here, wanted to start a New York office. They asked if I was interested, and I was like, all right, now I get to combine consulting and being an entrepreneur.
Yep.
So I made that jump. So one of the things you're gonna see as like common theme with me is like, I've moved a lot. Like, and back then you didn't do that, right? Back then it was, you were supposed to have like your 25-year career. You were, you know, my parents were teachers. You worked for one place for the rest of your life. So they were completely panicked every time I did something.
How did you overcome that objection each time? Because I think a lot of people probably deal with that sphere of influence, whether it's their close family, parents, siblings, close friends, right? How did you, I guess, block out that noise and keep taking steps each time to essentially try something new?
I mean, listen, I think I've always believed that life is short, and whether you work to live or live to work, work takes up a major part of our lives from a time standpoint, probably more so than anything else that we do, for better or for worse. And for me to be doing something that didn't inspire me on a daily basis just never made any sense.
You said, I always wanted to do something that inspired me, right? How did you even find that? Because I talk to a lot of people, and the biggest question I get asked is, I don't know what I'm passionate about, right? Like, how do you, I can't remember the last time I was passionate about something. I guess what type of advice could you give to someone who maybe hasn't found that inspiration? How did you find what inspired you?
Well, it's easier today than it's ever been, because again, back when I was doing it, like, it was not good to be going like 2-3 years and jumping to another job. And now everybody does it. Like, it's almost, you know, and again, this is, you know, with my HR hat on, like, you know, I'll say, like, I've seen resumes where I see people coming out of companies that have been in trouble for a long time, and this person's been there for 10 years. And then you start to think about, like, all right, like, why did they stay for so long? Why didn't they move and go do something better? So, like, I'm always looking for what is their journey and what's their story. So there's very, very little risk in going and trying something new right now. And if you walk away from every experience learning one new thing, and that could mean I found something that I liked, or I crossed something else off my list now that I know that I don't like that's still win-win. So, you know, take chances, make those moves, and you know, you try new things. Because I think the worst thing in life is like regret. And like, I don't think there's ever such thing as regretting a bad decision, because the bad decisions are like girlfriends. Whether it worked out or not, you learn from every one of them. So making a bad decision is better than making no decision at all. So the concept to me of, you know, trying something new, like, if you sat back and you had to wonder the rest of your life, like, man, what would have happened if I took that job?
It's the worst question to ask.
It's awful.
It's the worst.
It's awful. It's awful. It's okay to keep figuring out along the way. Like, that's the biggest lesson for college kids now, right? And I have a college freshman, which is trying to convince them that the decisions that you're making right now, like, you're gonna laugh at in 20 years.
So we get this new opportunity, right? And then we take it. This is after Anderson now,
yeah.
Right? What are we doing? More consulting at this point?
It's more consulting,
okay.
But now,
at
you know.
At this point, we're 25, 24?
Yeah, 25. So, yeah, so it's a consulting firm that's now going to focus on the intersection of, so instead of like the Anderson model where they were truly a systems firm and now they're trying to bring in strategy, this was a firm where they were going to try and grow it from the ground up, where it was strategy and technology together, because they were becoming more and more intertwined in our lives.
So at this point, the second stop consulting, third stop overall after college. Did you even have even more consulting after this, or how long did this stint last? So
this one was probably 2 years. They had ultimately acquired a company out of Stanford and decided that they didn't need a presence in New York. I had no desire to work out of Stanford, and it also made no sense that you're going away from, like, all of our clients were there, and the clients wanted that face-to-face. And at that same time, I had found a company, back then it was called Silicon Valley Internet Partners. And it really might be the most important company in my background because it was the one really that pivoted me a lot. One, into more of like a people-focused role. Two, was understanding culture within a company and how important it was. And they eventually became a company called Viant. We changed our name before we went public. But they, the first one was a technology company trying to add strategy. The second was strategy and technology growing up together. This was strategy, technology, and creative, all under one roof.
What part of creative?
So user interface, like user design, but also starting to do like
this was on like websites.
It was the dawn of .com. So we were really the first ones, and it was taking a lot of brick and mortar companies and helping them develop an online presence. One of the things that Viant did that I had never seen before. So Anderson invested more per employee than any company in the world, right? Because they had this whole separate school that they bought that was functioning full time. At Viant, all of our employees, you would go and spend a month up in Boston as part of your onboarding. So when I first started, the program was still kind of like being developed. So I went up 3 months after I started, spent a month up there, was blown away because it was such a great mix of teaching, but also like teaching how they were going to do things and how the three modalities kind of like came together.
This was perfect for you. I mean, technology,
awesome.
Strategy, creative.
It was awesome.
Everything pretty much led you to this point.
Yeah, and it was a lot of project-based work, so working together as teams. And after it was done, the CEO pulled me aside, and he's like, "I need you to build out and run this program for me." He's like, "I've been watching you for the last month. Like, I need your energy. You inspire people." And I was like, "Huh? Like what? Like." I was like speechless.
You got tapped on the shoulder a lot at this point.
Yeah.
So for anyone out there that maybe they want to be an entrepreneur, maybe they have aspirations, right? Or maybe they're working at a corporation for that matter. How can they set themselves up to be tapped on the shoulder? What was it for? Does it come back to work ethic again? Is that as simple as that?
No, part of it is you just got to put yourself out there, right? You got to speak up. You got to talk.
What does that mean?
This is gonna, I think, probably almost seem counterintuitive, but like I'm an introvert. Like I am so introverted. Like I'm not good at parties. I'm the person in the corner that doesn't want to interact. Like my wife laughs because if we go somewhere and there's kids or dogs, like she knows where to find me because I am not with the adults. When you're in a work environment, people need to know a little bit about what you know without being obnoxious. Like I always say, you have two of these, one of these, use them in that ratio. But at work, like I would take, I guess, bold chances, but like intelligent chances, and not be afraid to be myself. Like I don't think, other than maybe my first job where I was still feeling my way out around the workplace, I don't think I've ever aspired to be what someone wanted me to be. Like I've aspired to be me.
So not being scared to put yourself out there. When you actually do it, show up as your authentic self, and don't get outworked by the next person.
Don't get outworked by the next person. And the last one I'll throw in there, I think, is feedback is a gift. Good, bad, indifferent.
Check in.
Feedback is a gift, because the worst thing that can happen is that you're doing something where you're not performing in your job, and that could be skill-based, it could be behavior-based, it could be role-based, and for you not to know about it.
People have to be cognizant of when giving feedback.
Examples, be specific, right? I think if you're not giving someone an example, if I'm just telling you that, like, you're not a leader, or your presentation skills are bad, or like, so give me an example of where I had a presentation that you didn't think was delivered properly and how you would have liked to have seen it, right? So if you as the boss can't give someone feedback and let them know what I would have liked to have seen, then where's your credibility in being able to deliver that feedback? The whole idea of being constructive, I think, is important. You're not trying to destroy somebody, right? You're trying to inspire somebody to get better, to better themselves. And if you're a leader, like, there's no such thing as a leader who put an entire team on their back and in business or sports and got them to victory. Like, you have to inspire everybody around you to be better than they've ever been before, because I can't be successful without the people working under me.
Okay, so now we've essentially come to this point where all the pieces that we've learned or that we've experienced from, again, strategy, technology, creative, now they've all coalesced and we're in this role, we do this role for a couple years, and this was probably a point where you transitioned over to the people side?
Yeah. So,
why?
Yeah.
Why did you, banking, finance, strategy, creative, to now managing people? What caused that pivot?
So even at Anderson, I got very heavily involved in the people side of the business. I think it was always apparent to me, from day one, that the most important thing that any company has is their people, right? They are your assets, and it doesn't matter if you are Apple and have the best products in the world, or if you're a service company and literally your people are your products, your people are your business. I think ultimately all I ever wanted to do was be able to go somewhere where I was able to make a difference and impact a company, and the easiest way to do that is through the people. And at that time, the guy that I worked with and was part of hiring at Viant had gone over to Equinox Fitness. He was their chief technology officer. Equinox had never had a head of HR. And this is, you think Equinox today, it's like this global, yeah. I mean, back then I think we were 9 clubs in New York City. So all they knew was that they wanted somebody who wasn't an HR person.
They wanted someone who wasn't an HR person? Yeah. To be in an HR function?
Yeah, because they didn't want an HR admin person.
Got it.
They didn't want Toby from The Office.
Got it.
So, I went in day one, I was like, listen, I'm not an HR person. I'm like, I can solve your business problems with people-based solutions. But if you're looking for somebody to who understands the ins and outs of benefits or whatever, that's not me. I'll learn it, I'll be fine.
Yep.
And ultimately that's, the direction they went in. And I was the first head of HR, the VP of People and Learning at Equinox for 5 years. Wow. And helped them grow from the 9 or 10 clubs to over 40.
Okay, so now we're at Equinox.
Yep.
We got pulled in, tapped on the shoulder once again. How long did we spend there?
5 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what'd you pull from there?
A lot. It was a fascinating place to work. Again, entrepreneurial, not just a newish startup-ish company, but also a startup space, right? Equinox was redefining fitness. Nobody else there was no such thing as a premium fitness play. One of the things that I really wanted to do was understand all the different roles. So I would go and work front desk next to the front desk people, work maintenance next to the maintenance people, so I could see things through their lens. I got certified as a personal trainer so that I could walk the floor. The hardest thing for personal trainers is to drum up business. It was impossible for me to tell people how to do that well unless I could also put myself in their shoes. And I think there's a credibility factor there also, that I went through
You had to eat your own dog food.
Yeah. And I went through that training process though, right? I went through the certification process. I also, I think the other thing that I learned a lot there, I'll laugh, not that he'll ever see this, but the CEO and I didn't always see eye to eye on everything. But one thing that I loved about him is, you could ask him on a Wednesday, how did, the Greenwich Village Club do yesterday? He could tell you the personal training numbers to a nickel. Understanding the details of your business, understanding all the levers you have at your disposal at any given time, I think is so critically important. And that's something that I've taken with me everywhere.
Okay, so we've achieved some more success now at Equinox. We've been able to take the nuggets that we can now apply in our next venture.
Yeah.
What was next?
So, one of the things with Equinox that was a challenge was it's a 24/7 business. And as we started to expand more, and we had, 9 clubs in California at the time, I had clubs opening at 6 o'clock in the morning in New York, so employees are getting there at 5.
2 or 3 kids at this point?
I have 3. I had my 3rd kid when I was at Equinox. Yeah. I actually had to run we were living in Hoboken, I had to run from my desk because my wife was like, I think I'm in labor. I'm like, what? I had employees starting at 5 in the morning, our time, and then ending at midnight in California, their time, so 3 in the morning, our time, and I was on call 24/7, right? So, I didn't have a big team, certainly nowhere near enough to support the 5,000 employees that we had, and it started to really take its toll on me. And then towards the very, very end of my tenure at Equinox, I was diagnosed with MS, which was kind of a life-changing moment. I didn't even know what it was.
Was that a blindsided thing? Was that out of nowhere?
Yeah, so literally I was really run down from just the hours and the fact that it just never, ever stopped. And I had 3 kids, and my kids at that point were probably like 5, 3, and 1 or something. So they're like little petri dishes, like bringing home whatever from daycare. So I just assumed like I had some sort of bug or flu, and I called my doctor. I'm like, Doc,
well, how'd you find out?
Well, I was like, I need a Z-Pack, and he's like, what do you need a Z-Pack for? I'm like, I caught something from the kids. I feel awful. But like on the weekends, I would wake up, I would go downstairs, eat a little bit of something, fall asleep on the sofa until like, I needed to eat or go to the bathroom, do that, fall back asleep again. Like I was asleep 20 hours a day. So my doctor, good for him is that, in today's world where medicine is just doled out without the rigor that it should, he was like, you know what, you haven't been here for a while, why don't you just come in for a full workup, and if you need a Z-Pack, like, that's what we'll give you, and I'll make time for you tomorrow. He's like, just come in. So I was like, great, like, no problem. I go in for my appointment. Everything seems pretty normal to me. At the end of the appointment, he is like, listen, I want you to go see a neurologist. I just want to double check. And I didn't even like think anything of it because, doctors always lead to other doctors, right? You get one test, you get another test. It turned out that, so my doctor did his residency in Michigan. MS is a very northern hemisphere focused disease. Like if you look at the cases of MS around the world, there's like this band going through the northern hemisphere with nothing below the equator. Nobody knows why. But he'd seen a lot of cases of it, and he was watching me try and get dressed at the end of my appointment. I couldn't get like my foot in the pant leg. Like I was like rocking all over the place, and which I don't even think occurred to me was going on at the time, but that was his clue. That was why he sent me to the neurologist, and at that point he said that he knew. So I go to this neurologist, he sends me for CAT scans, MRIs. It was like awful. I was just being poked and prodded a lot, and I didn't know why. Like I honestly had no idea what they were looking for. And then one day I'm driving home from work, and it's like dark, it's raining, and he calls me, and it's not like, hey, come in, I want to review your tests with you. He was like, you've got MS.
Yeah, over the phone.
Over the phone while I'm driving. Like, and I was like, what? He's like, the test came back, you have MS. And I still remember vividly a couple things. One was, my first question was like, so like Jerry's kids? And he's like, no, that's muscular dystrophy. This is multiple sclerosis. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. He's like, call me tomorrow, we'll schedule time, you'll come in and talk to me. So, I'm driving home the rest of the way in complete shock, and I have to, I still remember, my wife was at our kitchen table, and like I broke down in tears, and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I have MS, and she's like, what's that? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I really don't know, I just know it's not good.
And then did you go on Google? Did you get like,
and that was the worst. That was the worst. It scared the crap out of us, going and seeing all these horror stories. And at the time that I was diagnosed, there's no cure for MS, but there's progression with meds.
Was this like before Montel came out with it and stuff like that?
Yeah.
So there wasn't like crazy amount of like awareness around it, right?
I honestly, I don't know that I spoke to anybody, in my inner circle of family and friends about it who knew what it was at the time. So yeah, it was very, very different. But they did start to have some medicines now where they were supposed to be able to keep the disease at bay.
So for those that don't know what MS is, just I guess from a very high level, what is MS?
So MS it's basically your body attacking itself. So all of our nerves basically, I'll take my cord from my coat. If you picture this as a nerve, or even like your iPhone cable is like perfect for it, right? Because it's got that plastic coating on the outside. That's called myelin. That's the protective coating for every nerve in our body. For whatever reason, our immune system starts thinking of that myelin as a foreign body, and it attacks it. So when it does, that nerve is destroyed, and there's no repairing it. There's no coming back, and you basically end up, you've got lesions. You can have them on your brain. You could have them on your spine. Every case of MS is different because the amount of lesions, where they are, how big they are, changes everybody's symptoms. And I think that's the challenge with it. So in a way, I was kind of lucky because I was diagnosed pretty quickly. People like Montel, others have gone years without a diagnosis. And having a brother in the medical field was amazing also, because I think all of this went down like on a Friday. And that Monday morning, I got a call from, I was at NYU, and I got a call from Cornell. And it was my brother and the head of neurosurgery and the head of neuroradiology. And they're like, we want you to drop everything that you're doing, come up here right now, bring your films with you. And they spent 2 hours going through all of my brain scans with me, telling me what it meant, what it was. They got me in immediately to see the head of the MS unit at the time at Cornell, who normally had like a 6-month wait. So I didn't have to go through as much of the uncertainty as other people in trying to figure out what it was. But you know, the challenges, the fatigue that I had mentioned, like that was an MS symptom. Vertigo and dizziness I had when trying to put my pants on, like that was an MS symptom. You know, there were some things that were going on with like my left leg and my left foot. Like I just thought it was from like overtraining. That was an MS symptom. So, you know, it was, again, it's just shocking. Like I mean, nobody ever expects a diagnosis in their lifetime. Like the first year, like I won't lie, the first year was a mess. Like it was, you know, there was a lot of feeling sorry for myself. You know, the going out on the internet, again, like in some ways this seemed a little bit like a death sentence. Like I was just, you know, horrified. But then all of a sudden you start hearing from other people who know someone who has it or who has it. Like I was really lucky. I had a bunch of friends who worked for then Continental Airlines, and I remember I was going down to play in Derek Jeter's charity golf tournament that he did every year. He did like a 3-day golf tournament at his home in Florida. And like, firstly, just like how amazing is that? Yeah. And so I had done it a couple times before. There was no way I was missing it. I didn't care how sick I felt. I didn't care what was going on. And they had given me these meclizine patches to put behind my ears to just kind of help with my like vertigo and just, because I felt like I was always on a boat. So I walk into the Continental Lounge, and one of my friends from Continental's there. And she takes one look at the patch and she's like, oh my God, do you have MS? And I was like, what? Like, why would you even think that? Like, you know, people use these for travel sickness and stuff like that. Turns out she had MS. Wow. So like, I instantly had someone that I could like ask questions to and talk to, and like having any sort of support around you like is the most important thing always. And then, you know, credit to my wife, because she was the one who probably after about a year, she was like, all right, like the mourning period's over. She goes, you got this for a reason, and so now we're going to turn it around and we're going to figure out how do we give back and do something for the MS community and raise awareness, blah, blah, blah.
How did this effect work, though?
I left Equinox. Okay. Yeah.
Were you working, though?
I took a couple of months,
okay,
but not a lot, yeah. I didn't really consider an option to take off a lot of time. I knew for a fact I couldn't do the Equinox rigor at that point, and I knew I needed some rest to kind of like recover.
So what did a future career look like at this point?
I mean, I honestly didn't know, because I didn't know what I was going to be able to do and not be able to do. I'm kind of stubborn, so I just assumed I'd be able to muscle my way through whatever it was that I needed to do. Yeah, like I'm just, like my best way of facing this is going to be to ignore it. Which I still do to this day, by the way. Like it's, you know, it's not like I wake up in the morning and think like, you know, first thing is like, oh, I have MS. Like, yeah. I mostly only think about it when I'm thinking about like how I can work with the National MS Society or help somebody else who has MS who's reached out to me. But my wife was like, oh, we should do something. We didn't really know what that meant. So we found like an MS walk. So this must have been about 15 months after I was diagnosed, I guess. And we didn't know what was gonna, like if people were gonna show up for us or what would happen. And my oldest daughter was in 3rd grade at the time. And we worked with her and wrote like an email that went out to everybody, and like, you know, she ended up raising like $16,000, and we ended up raising over $30,000 as a family. And we had, I still remember there's one guy who, you know, I'll say his name, Dr. Bart Mandel, who, Montclair resident, who sent a check to Allie in the mail because it got covered like in the local paper that, you know, this Team Greengrass thing was going on, and Allie had already raised this much money. So he sends this beautiful letter to her and a check, and then the day of the walk he came and met us. We didn't even know, and he gave her another check. And he brought his daughter, one of his daughters, with him. And like, I'm still great friends with Bart to this day, right? I mean, talk about just weird circumstances coming together. But Bart had been through a battle with cancer, and Bart knew what it was like to, you know, to feel isolated, to feel sick, to, you know, have a little bit of a helpless feeling. And I mean, that was just such like an unbelievably positive like moment in my life that like it never occurred to me in my life when I read a story about somebody who was suffering to like reach out to them personally if I didn't know them. Like that was just awesome. Just such an awesome moment. I mean, I love Bart to this day for doing that and having that impact on my family, because we were all blown away by it. Yeah. And then the day of the walk, like, we had some shirts made and still didn't know like were people going to show up. And like, I don't know, I think we were probably a third of the first walk that we did was Team Greengrass. And we did these really cool long sleeve, shirts, and the visual for me of seeing everybody, and it was like, it's funny, we've had all these beautiful days for the MS walk, and that was the one where it was like cold and bitter, but seeing everybody wearing their Team Greengrass shirts. Yeah. And I think the moment for me where like I stopped and like breathed and realized that they were all here to support me and my family, like, I mean, it was overwhelming. There's like no words for that, but it's also like, it's the moment where you're like, all right, like, I'm gonna get through this, I'm gonna be okay. We've dedicated ourselves for the last decade now just to raising money for MS, and we do all these different events throughout the year, and I spent a lot of time with like newly diagnosed patients and just helping them, know what they're going through, and it's
offer a support system, right?
Yeah, and that's been actually really, that's been rewarding.
So what'd you do after Equinox?
After Equinox, I went to a company called Axiom Legal. So Axiom was, we called it next generation law firm.
HR function again?
Yeah, so as the head of HR there, their CEO and founder was a huge Equinox fan. So one thing, if you looked at my career, that almost everything except my first two jobs have in common is, it's not just that they were startups and entrepreneurial endeavors within that company, but it was also the industry space was really, really new. So, what we were doing at Viant with, building.coms, like, it was an industry within consulting that never existed before. Equinox Fitness, like, it's not, I mean, again, it's easy to look back now in hindsight and say, oh, it was a brilliant idea. Like, nobody knew back then. I mean, they were brilliant in coming up with the idea, but nobody knew it was going to work. And it's the most successful company in the fitness space today. So Axiom was the same thing. It was, people were getting sick of law firms, the white shoe firms with the high price tags. And so you had clients that were really, really frustrated. And on the flip side, you had lawyers that were really, really frustrated. What Axiom was we would basically second our attorneys to our clients. So they're basically getting the same attorneys that they were getting them through a law firm, but they were getting them for less than half the price. The attorneys had much more flexibility in their hours, the projects that they chose to do. So it was reinventing that space and helping lawyers understand, why did they make that decision to go into law in the first place? Like, help them fall in love again with the law. But again, startup company, startup industry, it's kind of like...
Seeing a trend here.
Yeah, no, it's I had read the book, what's it called, Blue Ocean Strategy. Okay. And basically it's, most of our world is red oceans, which is bloody red oceans where companies are fighting over the same pie. And there's, find the blue ocean where, you're going to build yourself a new pie. And that, I didn't know even before I read that book that that's what I was kind of doing, but that's always intrigued me, and that's still my pattern today.
So we spent some time at Axiom now, right? But this wasn't obviously a permanent position for you. How long did it last, and what was your takeaway from that position?
So I was at Axiom for 3 years, and there was 3 really, great years, amazing people. They were really, really good at understanding culture and making sure that the people that they were hiring were people who are going to be like appreciative of that culture, and would be, and it doesn't mean, by the way, this is worth taking a second to talk about, because a lot of times companies think of culture and they're like, oh, we got to hire people who all believe in the same thing. And it's like, no. A positive culture is one where people bring differences to the culture, and everybody is then accretive to the culture, and everybody makes the culture better. It's not drinking the Kool-Aid and getting them, and Axiom understood that really, really well. My challenge was, it was becoming pretty apparent to me that, like, I didn't go to law school. Like, my passion for the law, or the fact that we were saving a client a lot of money, like, I don't know at what point, but it just stopped being enough to get me out of bed in the morning. The one thing I did realize, though, was I started to see my trend of companies where they were all a little bit late in when they brought my role in. Because it doesn't occur to startups all the time, like, when you need a really strong people presence, or that a people presence can be a strategic one. So my thought was, let me go out and start my own thing, And I will just focus on consulting to these small, high-growth startups that can't afford a full-time, like, people executive.
HR as a service.
Basically, yeah. And again, not like the administrative, not like managing benefits and payroll and stuff like that, but really just a strategic part of like organizational design and how are you building your company and and so forth. And basically, it's like how do you link all of your people activities to the goals of the company. I got really, really lucky because when I was talking to my CFO at the time, she's like, listen, I want to be fully supportive of you, but what if you agree to stay on or just give us whatever free hours you have? Like, we'll basically take any hours that you have every week until you have none left. So basically, they funded this opportunity for me to go and start trying to do this. Fortunately or unfortunately, the third client that I had within like 60 days was like, all right, we're growing too fast. You need to come on board full time. And the hard thing is when you're doing something like that on your own is you're never in business development mode because you're full-time taking care of the clients that you have. Yep. And this was an interesting one because it was a company called Ideally. They were the first ones in the flash sale space. So again, startup company, startup industry, right? It didn't exist before. And I was like, all right, let me go in and help build this thing out. I had someone from Axiom who I worked very, very closely with and respected, probably to this day more than anybody I have worked with in my career, who had gone over there to basically try and head up strategy for them. So it was all right. Time for another adventure. Literally, it was around the corner in Soho. My commute didn't change. It was so it was interesting in that I came on purely as the HR guy then. So I would say that the same way I used to do other roles and dabble in HR, like I was HR and I would dabble in other things as needed. Ideally quickly blossomed into a lot of other as needed. I mean, we were growing really, really fast. We were #1 in the Inc. 500. It was an amazing journey, and you're watching all these other companies now come into our space, which was crazy. And because then you're thinking, how do we move forward and defend the space that we've got? And I remember we had our VP of engineering, our SVP of engineering had resigned to take another role across the country. And the CEO came to me and he was like, hey, I need you to run engineering for me. I'm like, in addition to my job, I'm not a tech guy, I'm not an engineer. And he's like, yeah. He's like, you're the best leader we have. Like, I need you to run this team. We'll find somebody at some point, but run this team, get them back on track. So everybody was like telling me like, oh, dude, you were so setting yourself up for failure. And my thought the whole time was like, who is ever going to be dumb enough to let me do this again? Like, this is such a cool opportunity to try this. And then the COO of the company left, and they gave me customer service and the warehouse. And so I'm like learning all these new things. So it goes back to like, keep learning. If you learn, like, you're moving forward. And then our head of marketing left, and I ended up taking over like our photo studio and our copy edit teams. And so I had all this great like operational experience that was amazing. That Ideally was the first one really to give me like the formal opportunities to do it. Yep. And it would have been really easy to say like no to a bunch of it. Like, I mean, it was crazy. I was doing the job I was hired for, the SVP of engineering's job, the COO's job, and then at the very end, like also the SVP of marketing's job. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, absolutely crazy. But I loved it because I always viewed it as an investment in me. Unfortunately, what was going on at Ideally was that towards the end, so many other companies were moving into the space.
This space again was?
So it was flash sales. So basically, if you had like a designer, like a Rebecca Minkoff or someone like that, and they had overproduced a particular item one season, we would buy them and we would sell them. And instead of that stuff ending up eventually at like a TJ's or a Marshall's or something like that, where the brands had no control over how their brands are being presented, we could do really cool stuff with it online. But then what happened was the same thing that happened to the outlet stores. Right? So instead of, at the beginning, the outlet stores carried leftover product. Now brands make products specifically for the outlet stores. So that's what was happening in our space, and we had a lot of competitors showing up. So we were facing a lot of pressure, running out of money. At that point, I had Buzzfeed starting to call me, asking me to come in and interview.
Huge media company. At this
Not
point,
bad.
At this point, they were
No,
just
a couple hundred people. They were known for their cat lists at the time, right? Or like 21 squirrels that were annoyed with you today. But again, startup company, startup space, and I said no probably the first 3 times they called me, because I needed to find an exit for ideally that preserved the employees that, I mean, I hired everybody, right? Like, and it's, listen, anybody can do the journey on the way up, right? How you manage on the way down, like that's key. And we had entered talks with a number of different companies about an acquisition. And I had just decided, like, I am going to see an acquisition through because I want to preserve all these jobs. Like, I just, I had to do that. And the day that it was announced that we were bought by Groupon, Buzzfeed was like, all right, can you come in now? Buzzfeed was probably the first place in my career, though, where I walked in through the front doors and I was like, I have to work here. Like, the culture is like you could feel it in the air, like the energy and the excitement. And, we were, I think, under 300 people when I got there. Again, Buzzfeed back then was New York only. We had opened up basically a new country every other month when I was there, plus a huge presence in California. Everything about the company, like, I just adored. And the growth was crazy, amazing. I said before, like, it's really great to be the dumbest person somewhere. And some of the more senior people at Buzzfeed, Jonah Peretti, Zay Frank, Ben Smith, like, they're all brilliant. Like, just so brilliant. Like, you learned just by being in their presence. And it's funny, though, because one of the things that happens when you're at a company that's exploding like that is people start going after your employees, right? They want a bit of that Buzzfeed magic, so they want to hire people. And ultimately, that's what happened to me, was I had a company come after me really, really hard.
Which company was this?
Fanduel. So I'd say if there's one passion that I've had, and one, like, I always have like a list of things that I want to do and things that I want to try. And I'd say if there's one huge passion I've always had, and I always wondered what it would be like to work in this space, it was sports. There's not a lot of jobs in sports. There just aren't. And the teams and the leagues don't hire that much. And so I went in, I met with the CFO, who's now the CEO of Fanduel. Had a great conversation with him. Like, we thought alike. It was sports. It was, ultimately, I didn't want to leave Buzzfeed. Like, I really didn't want to. And
because it was still in hyper growth mode, right?
Oh my God, so much so. I mean, the brand was hotter than ever. But again, I never wanted to have that moment of, like, what if? Like, what if I had, hadn't gone over and tried out, being in sports? And they, it's funny because some companies, like, they'll throw like signing bonuses at you and stuff like that to try and incentivize you. I had made a comment at Fanduel during one of my visits that instead of like chairs in their lobby, they had the old seats from Yankee Stadium. And I'm like a sports memorabilia nut. And I said something about the chairs and how I love them, and my wife wouldn't let me buy them when they first when they were tearing the stadium down. And like, one day, I think we were actually coming home from vacation, and there's like a box on our front steps that, like, it's like the size of a Volkswagen. And she's like, what did you do? And I'm like, I swear to God, nothing.
This has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I'm like, I didn't order it. I'm like, I guarantee you my name's not on that box, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, my name's on that box. So Fanduel, a month after I get there, an employee from our #1 competitor won like $300,000 in one of our contests. And people went nuts. They were calling it insider trading. And then different states started looking at whether or not they thought daily fantasy sports was legal or not. And it went from good to really difficult very, very quickly. The employees were amazing. I mean, my team there, like, I loved the team that I built there. But, we had gone through a series of layoffs, and it was getting pretty brutal. And, we were starting to work on diligence for a merger with our top competitor, which I was fairly certain the government wasn't going to allow to happen. Yeah. They didn't seem to be big fans of ours at the time. And when we were going through getting ready for the next round of cuts, it just became apparent to me that you could cut 3 people out of my team, or you could cut me, right? And the company needed the numbers more than they needed me at that point. So I basically tapped out.
So we spent 15 months there. Obviously, you'd spoken why you'd wound up leaving out of necessity, right?
Yeah.
What was the next step?
The first part of that next step was to take the time to think about what the next step was.
What did you do to figure out that next step?
So I went back to my list, things that I hadn't done before that I was interested in, things that I was passionate about, and then I also, so it's so funny, like I'm not an organized person, but this goes back to like push yourself out of your comfort zone. When I get stressed or I need to be in problem solving mode, I go and I become like the most hyper organized person in the world. So I have a spreadsheet, right? So that as I look at different types of opportunities, I have the criteria that
What's the criteria? This is important.
Okay.
What's the criteria?
So me, I literally have one that says, am I the dumbest person? Which is just a way of saying, like, are the people there really, really smart? Am I going to learn from them? Passion for the company, passion for the space. I have work-life balance on there because even though my wife will tell you I'm not very good at it, you know, it's important to know that, you know, that I think I'm going to have some control over it. Yeah. I'll look at growth prospects for the company, growth prospects for the industry. You know, newer ones have been, you know, this is ironic given where I ended up, but, you know, what is the financial health of those companies? You know, because it's tough being in smaller companies where you're like, it's not just like, are we profitable? It's like, are we going to make payroll? And what I do is, you know, I'll go and I'll hone that list because it needs to change. Your goals in life, you and I were talking about that, your goals in life change, your position in life changes, like when you get married, you have kids. And that's not a bad thing, that's natural, like you need to evolve that. And so not only will I go in and make sure that those are still my criteria, but I weight the criteria, right? So everything can either be a 1 or a 0.5, and then I'll use that to rate opportunities against each other. And things will be force ranked. So I can't have two that I think are going to be the best work-life balance. Like one has to be better than the other.
Got it.
So ultimately, it's just making sure that my head and my heart are aligned. So at that time, towards the end of my tenure with Fanduel, I was introduced to this product called Theramu, which is a brand new, all-natural. At that point, it was just like I was just trying a topical ointment. I was going through some pretty difficult times with some of my MS symptoms. MS for me tends to affect the left side of my body much more than my right. And I was having a lot of pain in my left foot, my left calf. I was going to this chiropractor in the city that I love 3 times a week who's doing like different deep tissue stuff. And this was basically just so I could like function daily. I was on a lot of meds. So I think I had 7 different prescriptions going at the time. Painkillers, anti-inflammatories, anti-anxiety, migraine prevention, sleep. And I was also taking like 6 to 8 over-the-counter painkillers per day. Like, I don't complain about my pain ever. I just, you know, my whole idea was like I had to deal with it. But I was also like, I mean, that's like a deadly combination. Like I was just poisoning myself from the inside out. But you never question like doing what you have to do. So my friend, who I had met at Viant, he's doing the design work for Theramu, which is this new product that they're trying to launch. And he says, hey, I think you should try this. It's an all-natural ointment. Maybe it'll help. I'm like, you know, totally skeptical because when you have a chronic illness, one of the unfortunate side effects is that you find that there's these different parts of the population that try and prey on those populations, you know, different snake oil type things. I'm like, yeah, it's all natural. It's like 5 ingredients. Like, let me try it. So I try this Theramu stuff on my calf and my foot, and I noticed that the pain had subsided. What I didn't notice was, like, so the next day I go in for a personal training session, and my trainer at the end of the session has me up on the table where he's doing, like, you know, you're on your back, your legs up, and he's basically stretching your hamstring, your calf, and your foot. And he's like, what'd you do to your calf? I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, dude, normally I'm afraid to put any pressure because your calf is so rock hard and your foot is so rock hard that I'm afraid I'm gonna like tear muscle. And now they're both like completely malleable, and I'm like, no way. I'm like, I just put this cream on yesterday once. Like literally like a pea-sized amount I put on my foot and my calf. And I reached out to like the founders, and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. Tell me a little bit more about it. The founders and my friend came to New York. So we went in, my wife and I went in, we had dinner with them. And I really just want to take them out to dinner to thank them because I was like, oh my God, like this stuff is amazing. And they were like, what are you doing now? I'm like, oh, I'm just in the process of leaving Fanduel. I'm going to figure out what I want to do next. And they're like, well, Scott's told us all about you and your background. Like, maybe, you know, why don't you consult to us while you're trying to figure all that out? And, you know, I looked at my wife, I'm like, all right, like, you know what? Like, if other people can get the relief that I'm getting, like, that would be like fantastic. Like I could make that like my crusade while I'm figuring out the next step. And within like 2 months, they came to me and they were like, all right, like, I think you've done more in the last 2 months than we were able to do in the last year. Like, maybe be our COO. So I talked to my wife about it. I wasn't 100% sold, but I was starting to really believe that, like, you know, I'm not like a person who necessarily believes that things happen because they're for a reason, but, you know, I've had MS now for a decade at this point. Like, I get introduced to this product, which is amazing. I'm like, you know what? I'm like, let's give this a shot for a while, and we'll see. And I'd also at that point started giving it to some people around me, and I was seeing the same type of relief in them.
Are these people who just had chronic pain? Was it
mostly pain related? Yeah, mostly pain related.
People who were taking like opioids beforehand, or like they were taking?
I mean, opioids, epidurals, but even, I mean, one story for me was my youngest daughter, who's 12 now. She's prone to really, really nasty migraines, like the kind where you're like, she throws up, she's down and out for an entire day, and you hate giving kids painkillers and stuff. And you know, we're not putting her on like a Topamax or. So one day, my wife has gone up in Boston visiting her parents, and my daughter comes in, and she's like, "Dad, I got a headache coming on," and normally, like, if we catch them early enough, like, we can be okay, but again, it involves taking pills. And she's like, "I want to try the Theramu." I'm like, all right. So, you know, we massaged some into her temples, massaged into the base of her neck. She was in our little TV room. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go walk the dog. I'll be back in like 10 minutes, you know, just relax. You know, I walk back in 10 minutes later, and I'm telling you, like, she would be down and out for an entire day when these migraines hit. And I walk into the TV room, and she's doing headstands. And I'm like, "Zoe, are you okay?" And she just looks at me with a big smile and goes, "Dad, Theramu's gonna be famous." And I'm like, "Oh my God," I'm like, "You feel okay?" She's like, "I have no headache at all." And at that same week, I was still interviewing, which I had told, you know, Theramu that I would be, and just seeing what else is out there, which I think is also always important. And I think you should always not only encourage yourself, but encourage the people around you. It doesn't mean that you're actively looking, but like.
So you watch Shark Tank,
but
you don't go after the first deal.
Yeah.
You say, are there any other offers on the table?
Well, and you should always know, like, is your dream job out there? Because maybe, you know, maybe it is, and the time, you didn't know the time is right. Or, yeah, like I think it's important to also always know what you're worth, and to be networking, because you never know when something's going to implode, or you're going to need to reach out. Or so I had a great offer from a company that I really, really wanted to work for and take. Before I had a chance to tell the founders at Theramu about this other offer, they're like, "Listen, we've been talking." They're like, "Just take the keys, like, be the CEO, drive this thing. Like, we need to build this." It's odd timing for us. My oldest had just left for her freshman year of college, and yeah, Carla and I spoke about it, and we're like, again, neither of us ever believed in this mentality, but we were like, almost in unison, like, this is what I was meant to do. Like, I need to go and take this Theramu opportunity and help other people get this all-natural relief. And at the time, like, I was using the product that we had. We now refer to it as like a consumer strength, and it was topical. And like, the products now are like 2.5 times stronger than that. And now there's like sublingual elixirs and bath crystals and all these things that have like augmented the product line in the different ways that we can get people relief. And the best part is, for me, like, I'm down from 7 prescription drugs to 1. Like, I take my primary MS drug, that's it. I have not had an over-the-counter painkiller in well over a year. So, like, I'm healthier for it. You know, I'm not poisoning my body with all the different side effects that, you know, come from these different types of drugs. And listen, some people need those medicines and they don't have other options. A lot of people don't, and there's a lot of great all-natural options out there, which, you know, I think sometimes people stop and forget to even inquire, like, what else can I be doing right now to educate myself on what I'm going through? And that could be whether it's something like neck and back pain, or something like migraines, or something more serious like chronic illnesses, you know, like an MS or a Parkinson's. Or we had just gone through, you know, my grandmother had passed away from ALS, which, you know, might be the worst disease in the world. I mean, it is this awful thing to watch. And, you know, now I have customers who are ALS patients who, like, we're not healing them, we're not curing ALS, but, you know, they've got range of motion longer, the ability to swallow longer. Like we're changing people's lives for the better. Like, you know, I had one this week where it was, you know, a kid who's suffering from this awful outbreak that they originally thought was eczema, but it's like these uncontrollable full body rashes, and they've tried steroids and cortisones and nothing's working. And, you know, the doctor is the one who's reaching out to me, you know, asking like how we can, you know, try Theramu with this person. And literally after one application, you know, it's the doctor's like, it's unbelievable, it's working. And then the mom reaches out to me, you know, who wants to work for Theramu now because she's so blown away by what it did for you know, for her daughter.
Sounds amazing, right? And before we get into any more stories of really, I guess, the effect or the positive effects that the actual products have had, let's talk about the products themselves. What do they consist of? What's so great about them? And why are they actually working?
Sure. So that's definitely where it should be starting, is learning a little bit more about these products. So there's two active ingredients. The first is CBD oil, or a CBD isolate, which is? It comes from the industrial hemp plant. It's naturally occurring. It's called a phytocannabinoid. There's 0% THC. CBD is a completely separate element from THC, so there's no psychoactive effects. There's no drug test issues. It's 100% legal.
This is from hemp. What's the difference between hemp and marijuana?
So they're sister plants. So
okay.
They come from the same genus and species. The marijuana plant has something in it called THC, which is what's commonly, that's the psychoactive component that you get in marijuana. CBD is another naturally occurring cannabinoid in a cannabis plant, but it has no psychoactive effects. But it's quite effective in helping with a lot of different types of ailments and pain and inflammation. And one of the challenges is that we're hamstrung a little bit by the FDA in what we can say about it. We can't make claims about it. But what I can tell you is that the US government has a patent on CBD in which they claim it to be a neurological protectant, anti-aging, anti-epilepsy, anti-seizure. So it's pretty remarkable, and again, it's all natural.
Is it legal?
It's legal now in. We say it's legal in all 50 states right now. There's some stuff going on in Indiana that might call that into question in the state of Indiana, but it's going to be $1 billion industry next year.
Who's it safe for?
So, I mean, our youngest customers are 3 months old and our oldest are in their 90s. So it's safe for everybody. There's no such thing as overdosing on it. You can't have too much of it. And I've never met anyone, spoken to anyone who's had any sort of negative reaction to CBD.
What about people who obviously are working? Like, can you fail a drug test for using any of these products?
No, there's nothing to fail. There's nothing illegal in there. You know, if you get drug tested, and you know, they might be looking for a THC, but there's nothing in CBD. And in fact, to clarify that, agencies like the WADA, the World Anti-Doping Agency, recently came out and said that effective January 1st of 2018, they're explicitly making CBD legal for all of their athletes. So one of the things is sometimes there's confusion as the difference between something being legal and something not being illegal. So I think agencies like the WADA want to be very, very clear that they're specifying that it is in fact legal for all of their athletes. So you know, you have the two biggest you know, anti-doping agencies in the world have come out and said that.
Now, are there any studies that I guess talk to the efficacy of the products or CBD in general?
There are. So you know, I think one of the things that's important to note is that up until about 40 years ago, where you had a scientist from Israel discovered something in our bodies called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system is the thermostat for all of our body's cell function. And if you think about most ailments that we suffer from, it's because our bodies are out of homeostasis, and it causes either over cell production or under cell production. The CBD is a phytocannabinoid. It's a plant-based cannabinoid that works directly with the immune receptors in the endocannabinoid system to keep our bodies in homeostasis, to keep them healthy, which is why it's so effective for so many different things. But there's nothing illegal about it.
So if it's so effective, why hasn't it been adopted by the masses yet?
So again, it's going to be $1 billion industry this year. So it's clearly it's on its way. If you were to ask me to speculate on it, I would give you 2 words, like big pharma, right? I mean, they lobby hard against anything that is a threat to their space. And if you use me as an example, right? I was on 6 really, really expensive drugs, and I'm not taking any more.
At all?
No, I swear to God, I went from 7 prescription drugs to I'm on 1 now. And again, I also haven't had an over-the-counter painkiller in well over a year.
So especially now with the opioid epidemic and the initiatives that are going there, could this be a possible solution for the opioid epidemic?
I mean, I can tell you that we have. So there was a study that came out last week on that. You had asked before about where other studies are on CBD. So there is a website called projectcbd.org that links to not only all of the work coming out of Israel that this Dr. Raphael Mechoulam originally had done, but basically to every CBD study that comes out. And there was one that came out this past week on CBD being part of the answer for getting people off of opioids. Now, we have a number of people who have successfully done so, where they've used it to wean themselves off and then also treat some of the symptoms that they were using it for in the first place. Right now, with how restrictive it is to prescribe opiates, which is a good thing, doctors are very, very quickly looking for other options for their patients.
What has been the reception from the medical professionals?
Mixed. Like, we have some very, very aggressive and open doctors who, so we primarily distribute through wellness professionals. We over 1,000 of them are across the country. So we're basically selling wholesale to them, and they're selling to their patients.
What type of products do you have right now?
So right now we have 3 categories of products. We have topical ointments, which are called Relieve. We have sublingual elixir, which is called Calm. And then we have bath crystals called Soothe. So all of them have the CBD in it. There's 2 different strengths for all of them, and then the ointments come with or without menthol.
Who are these products for?
So again, we have a wide variety. We have babies who are using it.
I mean, you say babies. Some people may be looking at, well, you're giving CBD or medical marijuana to babies. Like, let's clear that up.
Yeah.
Why is it safe?
So it is not medical marijuana.
Okay.
Right.
So there we go.
It is not. Medical marijuana has. Listen, I'm an advocate for medical marijuana. I believe that there are people who benefit from it, and I think it's crazy for our government to tell anybody that they can't have something that helps them, and really has been proven to be very, very safe, right? But babies can't have THC. In fact, note for the kids watching at home, if you think marijuana is cool because it's medically allowed, if your brain is still developing, i.e. you're 18 years old or under, you shouldn't be dabbling with marijuana either. That's when it can have negative consequences. But our products have 0 THC in it, so there's none of the psychoactive components. Nothing at all. So industrial hemp technically can have up to 0.3% THC. For us, that's not acceptable because of the fact that we have babies using the product, even on the topical.
Now, what is the bad CBD product? Because you hear sometimes, right, that snake oil salesman, right? What's a good CBD product versus
a bad one? I think when you're talking about quality of CBD, there's a couple of really important things to consider. One is that both the marijuana plant and the hemp plant are super aggressive plants. They will pull anything out of the soil. So that includes heavy metals, pesticides. When they were doing the cleanup of Chernobyl, they planted hemp to pull the radiation out of the soil. Wow. So it's very easy, if you don't know where your CBD is coming from, to get CBD that not only is not high quality, but could also be pretty harmful because of what it's pulling with it. So we make sure that we get lab reports with every batch that we get to not only make sure that there's 0% THC, but there's no heavy metals, there's no pesticides. That's important, especially for if you're using the elixirs where you're ingesting them internally. I think the other thing is the amount of CBD in different products. So I think some products have very little, some have a lot. Depending on what you're using it for, it becomes more or less important. But there's some where they just put a touch of CBD in with a bunch of capsaicin or something that you're going to feel on your skin. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting a lot of CBD. But I think the biggest thing is the bioavailability of the CBD. So, our skin is actually thick stuff, right? And most products that you put on in moisturizers, cosmeceuticals, like they're not transdermal. They're not going to go deep.
And why is that important with like a topical?
Because you want to go to the source of the pain, right? You're not, if you really want to help someone, you're not trying to distract them from the pain. You're trying to relieve the pain. And to relieve the pain, you have to relieve the source of the pain. So that's usually not in the top 2 layers of our skin, which is where most products sit. So we use as our other active ingredient emu oil. It's a natural byproduct from the emu food industry, so we're not harming the birds specifically for our product. It's leftovers from the food industry. We use the only FDA-approved emu oil facility in the world to process, so we're using the highest quality available. They have the same fatty lipid system as us. They have the same molecular structure. It's super transdermal. It'll go 7 or 8 layers deep, and we bind it to the CBD to take it to the source of the pain.
If you can give your best, not takeaway, but what people need to know about not just Theramu, but CBD products in general, or just common misconceptions that are out there that if they're interested or curious about it, that they should know.
I mean, again, the biggest thing to repeat over and over again is like, CBD is not psychoactive, it's not going to mess with your brain, it's also not going to make you fail any drug tests. The other is that it's completely legal, and it's available, in stores, it's available online. Like, there's a number of ways to get it. Do your research, do your homework, don't work with companies that can't tell you where their CBD came from. They can't provide or produce lab reports showing you the purity of it. Talk to your medical professionals, because at the end of the day, it's been life-changing for me as a product. I'm not a doctor. Talk to your medical professional about it and ask them for their opinions on CBD. If they don't know about CBD, I would argue that you're working with the wrong medical professionals, because everybody should know about it now. Everybody should at least be asking about it. So, like I said, we work with over 1,000 wellness professionals who will sell Theramu to their patients, because it's important to us that you've got your doctor's support. We want to work and partner with wellness professionals, not work against them. They're the ones who know their patients the best. They're the ones who are dealing with them every day. But again, if you have a wellness professional who's not even open to understanding what Theramu could do, or looking at all of the research that's available on CBD and CBD products, or even emu oil, by the way, is also a natural pain reliever, a natural anti-inflammatory. It builds collagen in the skin. Our products work for eczema, psoriasis, epidermolysis bullosa, which is a skin disorder that most people have never heard of, and it's completely awful, and nothing else works, but our products do. So, right now I feel like sometimes we're fighting our own government to provide relief to people who need it, but the answers are out there. People can go to theramu.com and they can click on help and they can ask us any questions they want. I talk to our customers every day because that's really, really important to me to know what are the questions that people have or what are their concerns. So if you went to your backyard today and picked a flower and found out that it did all these things that CBD does, like, it would be the front of every newspaper tomorrow.
So if we're sitting back here a year from now, where's Theramu? What does life look like for Joel?
On the Theramu front, what I'd really like to see is, a few weeks ago, Target had agreed to carry one of our competitors' products. And within 4 hours, it was taken off the shelves.
Because of?
Nobody knows. But the reality is...
Taken off by shelves by Target.
Yes, but my speculation is that, so the DEA is not allowed to go after anything in our space. It's explicitly written in every budget. It has been since 2012. They're not allowed to spend $1. Our current
of CBD, you're saying?
Anything cannabis sativa related. Our current Attorney General, no secret, hates the space. Will do whatever he can to damage it. The one way that they can put pressure on us is through the financial systems. So my guess is that's what happened at Target. Right? California is going fully live recreational marijuana on January 1st. It's going to be a $5 to $7 billion industry in 2018. There's no banking for the industry. It's going to be a $7 billion cash business. Like, how's California collecting taxes on stuff like that? So, like, that's the craziness of this world right now. I'd like to see, if we fast forward a year from now, that that stigma's gone, that the banking is in place to support the industry, that the products are more readily available, whether it's Theramu or other products. Like, I will put our products up against every other one out there because ours work better. I've seen it. I've seen other products fail where ours work. But it's not to say that other products don't work at all. Like, some of them are very, very, very good, and I'd love to see more people have access and be relying less on the prescription drugs where the symptoms are often worse than the ailments that we're treating in the first place. If I'm lucky enough to still be part of Theramu a year from now, like, that would be amazing, because I really do just enjoy spreading this mission as much as I possibly can. And like I said, talking to customers every day to understand how we're helping to change their lives, and being this positive beacon at a time where, you know, people aren't sure what's going on. We have more serious medical ailments than we've ever faced in our lives. And when I get a call from a mom because their kid was diagnosed at age 3 with selective mutism, and after less than a week taking Theramu, they whisper their 20 spelling words to their teacher, and that's the first words they've ever spoken in school. Like, there's nothing better than that. Like, there's no substitute for that. Like, that will, like, you know, so if I'm still doing the same thing a year from now, the exact same thing, and fighting this battle, like, that's okay with me, because I just need, you know, that's what keeps me going. Like, I'm so lucky to be involved with these families that we're helping and getting these stories.
It seems like you picked another right one, or good one, and just on the cusp of that exponential growth, and this time it's actually something that you seem to be really, really passionate about, and you get to use all those skill sets that you've learned, not only to make it succeed from a business standpoint, but also to infuse that love of people, that love of person that you've had as well, to actually make a change in all these people's lives. So high five to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me today, talking to me today. Let me come back to Hoboken.
We're not done with you just yet.
Okay.
So if we haven't learned enough about you yet, we're just gonna learn a little bit more.
Okay.
This is a time show where I really like to kick it over to you, and if there's any golden nuggets, mantra, just life lessons that you've learned that you can convey to our audience, now would be the time to do it.
I mean, listen, we actually talked about a lot of career stuff today, and I guess technically that's what I do, right? Like, you know, for a couple of decades, I was like a chief HR officer. Although I hate that term. Like, it's people. That's what it is. You're dealing with people. But, you know, most people that I know are not in jobs that they're going to be in for the rest of their lives. And where there used to be a stigma around that, now it's encouraged. I think quite often your best learning is in front of you, and it always should be, right? I mean, you should always be striving to get better at what you're doing, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. So I think having a mini plan in place, you know, we talked before about your goals are going to change throughout your life. That's okay. You change throughout your life. So of course your goals are going to have to change with it, because you're going to learn along the way, what are the things that I love, but what are the things that I don't want to do? That's just as important. But try and know what point B is going to look like. Anytime you're getting itchy, or you think that you need to make some sort of move, stop focusing or dealing with, you know, that you're not happy with where you are, and focus on what are the types of things that you think that you might want to do. Make a list, write it down, tell the people around you. Telling the people around you is a really funny thing. It's accountability, and they're going to ask more questions, and they're going to make you think through things. But also understand what are the things that are important to you. Understand your personal priorities, both on the business side, on your personal side, and how are you going to use those to evaluate your next opportunity that's in front of you. Like, have that point B in mind. And again, it's not your ultimate point B, because ultimately, you know, your ultimate point B, I guess, is point Z. There's a lot of little stops along the way, and take intelligent risks. And if you make a mistake, that's okay. Don't be afraid, because that's going to get you to the next thing. It's all part of a journey. And that's really what you want, is, you know, make sure that you're empowering yourself along the way to be on this journey, and don't get stuck in your own head. Don't get worried about making a mistake. You know, focus on what that future is going to be, and enjoy the ride. Learn along the way from the people around you. Learn along the way from yourself. Take a moment to, you know, to be introspective and understand, you know, what have you liked along the way? What didn't you like along the way? What's worked? What hasn't worked? And what's the so what? Like, what does that mean going forward, and how do I incorporate that?
Well, I'm just glad your journey led you here. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule, being a dad, being a husband, being a CEO, being an advocate for MS and for just helping people in general. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a pleasure. I loved it. This was great.
And there's one more thing we have to do.
Yes.
And it's pretty much of the utmost importance. And it's the way we end our show every week.
We're gonna high five. Knew it was coming.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
Have a great day, man.
You too.